You're listening to the REITE Club podcast, where the focus is all about helping you grow your real estate investment portfolio and live the life you want to live. Come grow with us and join our community at thereiteclub.com. And now your hosts, Sarah Larby and Alfonso Salemi.
I'm really excited to dig deep, learn all about you. So if you can, give us a little bit of an introduction for those that are listening, your background and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. So I'm Diane Ulman. I'm a founding partner and co-owner of Integris Law. We can say we are a province-wide residential real estate law firm. And I say province-wide because that was one of the huge benefits of COVID, is that the banks, most of the banks allow electronic signatures on mortgage documents. So now I'd say 99% of our closing meetings with clients are done virtually on Zoom. And so it has made our practice extremely flexible. We can offer, evening and weekend client appointments, and you don't even have to count the commute in the appointment time anymore. So it's been quite great.
Yeah, that's like one of the best things that came about from a legal standpoint, is to be able to do everything on Zoom. You print it off, you just show them everything is done. You don't have to go anywhere. It just makes it so much more simple. And so How long have you been practicing law for?
Right. So I've been a lawyer called in Ontario for over 10 years now. And I originally started in litigation, and I had a blast doing it. I loved my appearances in court. But the balance between the number of hours you spend by yourself at a desk in front of a keyboard drafting endless documents to the amount of time you spend in court, it's probably a factor of like 10 hours, 15 hours of prep time to maybe an hour in court. So I'm much more of a people person. So I ended up switching over to residential real estate because it's just a lot more client facing. And I actually call it happy law because people are usually really excited about buying or selling, or even if they're refinancing and paying off a whole bunch of debt, they're happy to get that weight off them. So it's a much different experience, and I love it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I want to back it up just 1 second, because when real estate law, you guys unfortunately sometimes get lumped in with, closing costs and legal fees, and it's like a line item when investors are, doing their due diligence on, on a deal. So, what does a real estate lawyer do? I have ideas. I know Sarah's worked with, and has your ideas, but what does a real estate lawyer actually do when we're, doing the closings and the legal fees? What are we actually paying for?
Right on. So honestly, we're the last stop on the deal. So a lot of times our work is kind of, I'm saying overlooked, only because it's a bit of a black box. You just show up on a Zoom meeting with your lawyer now, you sign some documents, all of a sudden your name's on the title, and we were just, like you said, an expense line on a account sheet. So the point is, this question, what does a real estate lawyer do, was actually asked to me by a family friend's 4-year-old this summer. And it's nothing, it's quite something to have a 4-year-old kind of question your whole existence and how do you boil it down so a kid can understand what you do every day. So really, there's kind of 3 areas. So really, when a real estate deal is about to close, we're confirming 3 things. We're making sure the right people are signing all of the documents. We're making sure the right people are involved, especially if we're talking about a corporation that's either buying or selling. If there's multiple directors, are enough directors signing all of the documents? Because some of those articles of incorporation say 2 of 3 directors need to sign everything. So we're confirming that. Number 2, we're confirming information about the property itself. So that's probably what most people think a real estate lawyer does, is check the title, make sure there isn't anything unusual, any odd encumbrances, liens, all of those things. We're double checking that. And then the last thing is we're confirming the money. So there's always money involved. We're basically holding the money between, if I'm on the buyer side, I'm holding our buyers' funds, mortgage funds, and some of their cash, and then I'm transferring it to the seller's lawyer. So the point is, you've got 2 complete strangers transferring a lot of money. We're pretty much the middle people transferring the funds, but also we're confirming where that money is coming from. We're making sure that your mortgage terms are what you expected, what you thought you signed originally with the bank or the private lender or whomever. So we're just making sure that everything is good to go.
That's a very good, simple explanation that, like you said, you just brought it down to like a 4-year-old level, which is awesome. But you talk about title, and that made me think of title insurance. If you wouldn't mind just explaining a little bit what that is, why it's important, and what could happen if you potentially don't have it.
Right. So I would venture to say if a purchaser refused to get title insurance, it would be very difficult to find an Ontario lawyer that would do the deal. So historically, a lawyer would write an opinion letter, go through all of the title, the historical title books to confirm that the like chain of ownership is correct. Now all of it is electronic. We can do it from our desk for the most part, and everything is certified by the Land Registry Office. The caveat to that is sometimes there is something that didn't transfer over to the electronic records. So title insurance covers the brand new owner for any issues that may have happened in the past. But also, I think more relevant is it also protects you against things like title fraud, mortgage fraud, those types of things that could happen in the future. So your title could be perfect today, you're the new owner, but something really shady could happen in the future, and your title insurance covers it. There are some other things that it does cover, like if the seller takes off and doesn't pay out the last of their utility bills, which they should, your title insurance covers that, so that's not going to be out of pocket to the new purchaser. But yeah, there are many things, and honestly, I wouldn't recommend you don't get title insurance, and you only have the option as a buyer if you're buying the home with cash without a mortgage. If you're getting a mortgage, title insurance is going to be a requirement.
And it doesn't seem to be that expensive either. Like, what are you seeing in terms of cost for title insurance?
Right, so it varies depending on if it's a detached, if it's a condo, where it's located, the value of the purchase price, and also the value of the mortgage itself. So those all get kind of weighed together. So I mean, on the low end for a condo, it could be about $180, $150 in that range. If you're talking about like a $2 million home in the GTA, you're looking at perhaps like $1,500-$1,800 depending on the mortgage values involved. But it's a one-time fee, so it really is it's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, definitely worth purchasing that title insurance on that property. And I want to go back to, you finding some things, encumbrances on the properties, and I'm sure you've had some great stories on some things that you found. We've purchased over 200 homes. And, luckily nothing too crazy. It's been sometimes, like you mentioned, utilities not paid out, or maybe some back taxes or things like that. But what happens if you're on closing date or a few days up until closing, and you see that, I don't know, like ABC Construction Company has a significant lien on the property? Walk us through that worst cases, closing getting delayed. How does that all get ironed out or worked out?
Right. So if something is registered on the title, something like that, like a notice of pending litigation from a contractor, that absolutely, if I was representing the purchaser, I would absolutely want that dealt with, because then if my purchaser closes on the day they're supposed to, it means they're not able to get the title clean. There's going to be this lien, this encumbrance, this like black mark basically on the title. So in that situation, depending on the motivations for my purchaser, sure, we would ask for an extension so this contractor situation can be sorted out. In other situations, sometimes there's essentially, I'm calling it a lien, but basically it's a writ. It's called a writ against an individual. So it's basically there's a court judgment against one of the sellers, so against their personal name. So it actually doesn't appear on the title of the home, but it appears when you search their personal name on the registry. And in that situation, it could be a court judgment for CRA back taxes. Like, there's lots of reasons. Family Responsibility Office is actually one that pops up quite often. And those situations, it actually depends on the value involved. Because if say for instance you have a name similar to somebody who has a court judgment against them, they can make a statement saying, hey, I'm not one and the same person, and we can just move on with the deal and carry on, and there's no issue. So it really depends on the type of encumbrance, the type of writ that pops up at the time. But that's why we're doing our searches on the purchaser side, just to kind of finish that off. We're doing the searches like 1 to 2 weeks before closing. So if something like this pops up, we've got time to address it and correct it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know like we're talking about different situations, but I'm going to give you a situation that I think a lot of real estate investors, and I know this is, you know, you're in the industry, always hear about. So let's just say you've bought a house, or you bought a, you know, something with vacant possession, quote unquote. You've asked for it to be vacant on the contract, and you realize maybe you do a walkthrough the day prior that the tenants is not leaving and you can't move in. Maybe it's some, you know, maybe it's a house that you're moving into. What can you tell us? Like, I mean, maybe you can give us an example of a situation that happened, and maybe you can give us, you know, some potential outcomes of what can happen. A, if you close with the tenant in there, and B, if you see the tenant is not moving out maybe a day prior.
Mm-hmm. Oh, tenant questions. Yes. Yeah, hot topic. I feel like I'm talking about tenant scenarios most days of the week.
It's our life, right? I mean, we're landlords.
Right.
We invest enough. This situation will happen. Hopefully, it doesn't happen to you, but it will happen at some point. I feel like this is very common. I don't know how often you see it, but
Yes. So it comes up quite often. This is where if we actually have to do some kind of going a few steps forward, if we have to go to the landlord-tenant tribunal, we're also getting like a paralegal involved, because this is very much like their wheelhouse to appear at the tribunal. But talking about closing day, leading up to closing day, we find out there's a tenant that hasn't vacated. Again, if I'm on the purchaser side, if we have flexibility not to close and just extend it, I would highly recommend extending the closing date, because if you close and you take on that tenant, you're pretty much inheriting that issue, and now you're going to be dragged into it. It would be better if you were able to extend a month or whatever, and hopefully that tenant, that's enough time for that tenant to leave. Certainly on the seller side, if it's your tenant who isn't leaving, oh man, you are, on the face of it, on closing day, you are in breach of that contract, and you've opened yourself up to liability to be sued by the purchaser, because you were not able to deliver that home with vacant possession as you contracted. So in that situation, as a seller, I would be highly motivated to perhaps do a cash for keys scenario to make sure that tenant leaves. And certainly I would be handing over any cash for those keys hand in hand when their moving truck is already started and in the driveway. Don't send them that money a week before and hope they leave a week later. It's got to be kind of right at that moment when they're driving away. So yeah, it's a tricky situation. There's no silver bullet, unfortunately. I wish there were. If there were, we would be like the #1 law firm in all of Ontario. We could solve that issue. But yeah, you just keep in communication with your lawyers involved. Let them know when you're going through those walkthroughs, like, hey, heads up, I don't think the tenant has packed their stuff. Just want to let you know so we can get ahead of it.
So I just want to summarize it. So as the buyer, if you're trying to buy something that has no tenant in there, it is probably best that you at least you save one of your showings, the last showing I usually do it the afternoon before, so that I could do a walkthrough, not only to make sure if I ask for vacant possession that person is actually gone, because if they're not, then I need to let lawyers know to delay the closing. Like you said, as soon as you close, it becomes your problem. But B, I've had situations before where I've had to get 2 dump trucks of crap moved, and, you know, luckily the seller in this case ended up paying for it, and we're fine, you know, with covering the costs. But these are things that you could negotiate ahead of time if you at least save your last showing before you actually close, if there's any big issues that are in breach of contract. If you're the seller and you've got your tenant there, I mean, that's unfortunately a hard battle, and hopefully cash for keys work. They don't always work, but I think from a summary, be careful on agreeing to vacant possession, if you know that it may not be something that you can do.
Thanks for listening to the REITE Club podcast and joining our community of real estate investors online at thereiteclub.com, where the focus is about helping you grow. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks from your hosts, Sarah Larby and Alfonso Salemi.